Welcome to the Brandwise podcast, where we talk about the big branding moves that business owners are making and the why behind it. I'm your host, Jess Freeman, here to help you be wise and be bold. Katie Hunt is the founder of Proof to Product, a business strategist and mentor to product-based entrepreneurs. And part of why I wanted my friend Katie to share her story today is because she is someone who had been in business for many, many years before she rebranded and had a solid brand reputation built up. And she still took that leap of faith to rebrand because it's never too late to rebrand. And as you'll hear, it was scary for her, but it paid off. So here's my conversation with Katie Hunt. So excited to have my friend Katie Hunt on the podcast today. So to get us started, Katie, what is your brand all about?
Sure thing. So, well, first off, Jess, can I say thank you for having me? This is really fun to reminisce and talk back about the rebrand that we did. I think it's such an important topic too, and I love that you're tackling it from different points of view. So thank you for creating this space and for inviting me to come back to share my story here. I am about empowering people that make physical products, and I want to help them build sustainable, profitable businesses in their own way and at their own pace, meaning we offer a whole lot of different solutions and opportunities for them, but we want them to create a business that serves the life they want to live, not just like following a pattern of here's step 1, 2, 3, 4. We love patterns. We love like frameworks and things like that, but ultimately everyone's business is going to be different. And we just want to empower them to recognize that they have choices and opportunities for their business and how they build it.
I love it. And Katie is amazing at what she does. Like,
Thank you.
I pick her brain quite often. So
I love talking strategy. I love talking about the problems that we all face as business owners and how we can tackle them in a way that feels good. It's not just solving the problem, but like, how is this really pushing us towards the business we want to have long term, right? Like none of us are at this stage, none of us are in it just as a hobby. We're living off of our income and we're trying to build a legacy business perhaps, or create some sort of larger impact with what we're doing.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of long term, you have been in business quite a long time, like me.
Yeah.
And obviously you've rebranded. That's why you're here. So talk to us about like what the name of the business used to be and what made you decide, oh, I need to like shift. Because you are also like, as we have for the listeners, if you haven't listened to all of the episodes, we talk about rebranding looks different to everybody. Sometimes it's a name change. Sometimes it's just a logo. Sometimes it's messaging. But you are one of the few that so far that has also done a name change. So like walk us through that.
Yeah, we did. I joke that it was like a complete overhaul because we changed the name of my company. We then had to have all new assets, right? Like the logo and the colors, although we stuck with some of the same, some of it. We did an entirely new website. Like it was a major, when we talk rebrand, it wasn't just a refresh. This was a complete overhaul. And so for context for your listeners, I started my company in 2008 was my product-based business, but this brand I started in 2011 and it was called Trade Show Bootcamp. And at the time, I kind of started this business on a whim. I had a product-based business. I was figuring out how to prepare for trade shows. Social media was in its infancy at the time, and I was connecting with people on Twitter. Instagram didn't exist, to give you some context there. And we were just sharing tidbits and things on Twitter mostly in the middle of the night as we're preparing for these trade shows. And I still had a corporate job at the time. And I had a couple of small children. I was craving community. I was craving for a place where we could talk about these nuances of our business and really whatever we were working towards. And so at the time, when I came up with this idea, we were all preparing for trade shows. And so I said, let's get everybody on this call and let's hear from, buyers that we're selling to at these trade shows. Let's hear from other brands who've already been through this. And let's create this programming essentially. It was teleconference calls at the start, but now it's into programs and memberships and coaching things and anyhow, but my point is we started real grassroots. It was me needing other people. And at the time, their focus was on trade shows. And so naming this on the whim business that I was creating, Trade Show Bootcamp, it made a lot of sense. That's where we were. And the telephone calls and the conference calls ended up becoming webinars. And in this process of growing this brand, which was not what I set out to do, by the way, like it really was there just to aid me with building my product brand. But as I started to gain some more following and people noticing and more people wanting to take our programs, I very quickly realized that the people that wanted to exhibit at trade shows needed a whole lot of other things in their business in alignment before exhibiting at a trade show made sense. There were a lot of people who were like, no, I just want to go do it. But then they would go and they'd spend all this time and money to exhibit at a trade show, and they didn't have those foundational pieces ready yet. And so our curriculum continued to expand, right? We were making things up as we were going in those days and still are, but we would expand the curriculum. So we started talking about how to create a product line, how to price your product line, what kind of sales tools you needed in order to successfully sell wholesale. And trade shows that we were preparing for was a platform to how to reach wholesale buyers. But again, when I went to my first trade show, there were a lot of things I didn't know. My pricing was wrong. I didn't have my catalog in place. Like there was just things I didn't know because I didn't know them. And so we created this community, and that's why we named it Trade Show Bootcamp. It made sense at the time. And as we continued to grow, it started to feel out of alignment for me. Because again, we were adding these other layers of product development, sales, marketing. And, I get a lot of people that were like, well, I'm a product brand, but I don't want to do trade shows. And I'd say, that's okay. We cover a lot of things.
Mhm.
And I felt that like friction a little bit of people saying, well, I don't think this is for me. And I'm like, it is. Come, welcome, like, come join the fun. And so I waited a really long time to rebrand. I was afraid to do it. And like we talked about at the front of this episode, it was a big project. It wasn't just a refresh of an existing name. We were changing the name entirely. And at that point, I had been in business for 8 years.
Mm.
So changing the name had me petrified on a lot of, like, it made sense. Like logistically, it made sense. Like all of it made sense. But I was afraid. I was afraid that no one would know where to find me. No one would know who I was, that I would eventually have to like go back to the beginning and start building my brand name recognition from the start. And we did have some hiccups, and I'm happy to share some of those things with you. But I was really afraid of like, am I starting over now because I'm rebranding? And that wasn't the case. People knew how to find me. People celebrated. We made a big, what do you want to say? We made an event out of it, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Like it wasn't just like, oh, hey, we have a website. It was like a launch, like an official launch.
It was a major launch, and we spent several months planning for it. And so when I say a launch, I mean, we developed an entirely new website. With all that, well, we had to pick the name. Picking the name was a hard thing. And then we had to figure out the actual branding. What colors are we using? What's the logo going to look like? And then we built out the new website. And that was a huge undertaking for anyone that's done a new website. Like, how are we going to position this, and what kind of imagery do we need? And it's a lot of work, as you know, Jess. You do incredible sites, and they're all so unique and beautiful. But so we did that. We did a whole campaign where we brought our alumni in, and we asked them to create videos about our community, and we called it the I Am Proof to Product campaign. And we would share those on social media and stuff, like as we were transitioning, to show who was involved and why that's the new name, by the way, listeners.
Surprise, Proof to Product.
Yeah. Proof to Product is our new name, current name. I don't anticipate us changing it again. But my point is just that, like, we made an event out of it. We had like podcast episodes leading up to why we did it, and the marketing plan that we had. It was a full-blown launch, like a launch I've never ever done for any of our programs, and it turned out great. It really did. It was a lot of, I was nervous, I was scared, but I wish I had done it sooner, if you ask me now.
Yeah. Okay, so I know it's been a few years. Do you remember how long it took from like when you officially decided, okay, we're going to start this process, and then like the name, all the assets, the website, like, do you remember about how long that whole process took?
Yeah, I think, well, and also, Jess, we should tell your listeners, like, I'm one that, like, I think deeply about things before I
She does, yes.
act on them. So I tend to overthink things, and I I tend to take my time in thinking about what I want to do, but once I make a decision to do it, we act pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
But I would still say there were so many different pieces of this that needed to happen. So I would say at least 6 months between the time I decided, okay, we're moving forward with it, and here's the new name, Proof to Product. I pulled in a lot of different talent and a lot of people to help me. We had a graphic designer help us with the new logo. We had somebody help us building out the new site. Those things were kind of the logo happened first, then the website. But then all the like marketing pieces of it. Okay, how are we going to leverage this on social? How are we going to bring our community into the celebration of this? Are we refreshing any products? Like, it's kind of a good opportunity to look inward and say, like, do we still like everything we're doing? Because this is a chance to come out fresh. One of the things, Jess, I was really nervous about, and that was in our big marketing plan, was switching my Instagram names.
Oh, yes.
So I had already, I should also mention too, I'm jumping around on my timeline here, but I had started my podcast. So we started this business in 2011. I started my podcast, which was called Proof to Product, in 2017. And I made the rebrand in 2019. So I already had the Proof to Product like logo and all that stuff from the podcast, but we were debating whether to do a refresh on that or just leave it as is. And I ultimately decided leave it as is for changing the company name to the podcast name, because that way we'll have a little bit of continuity and people will be able to tie it together. But it took a while, and I was really nervous about the Instagram switch of like, okay, we have the Proof to Product handle, but it's been only about the podcast. We have the trade show camp handle for Instagram that's only been about our products and our programs and services. And we're going to have to flip-flop them, because I wanted to keep the trade show camp handle had more followers and users, and I wanted to keep that as our primary. And so that was a stressful situation too.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that for some reason. Like, unless I'm thinking of someone else, I'm like,
We talked about it because the process has changed, but at the time you had to change your original handle to something else. You had to change both handles to something else. And then I had to take and move change the trade show camp to Proof to Product, and then and I wanted to keep the trade show camp one so I could redirect people to say, go over here. So it was tricky because you had to the timing had to be right. And I was so nervous that Instagram was going to be like, no, you can't take that name. It's already been in use or whatever it was. And it all worked out in the end, I'm sure.
But it's just one of those details that you have to worry about and think about.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure this is also when, and this is a very technical thing, but of course this is what I'm thinking about. This is also when you switched from WordPress to Squarespace, right?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. So, which for people listening, like, that's not something you have to do in a rebrand. Like, that was more for you, so it was easier for you to manage the website.
Correct. We had been on WordPress for 8 years, and we'd had a number of instances where we had been hacked or broken it. Like, our checkout stuff was safe and fine. People's credit card information was not taken, but like spam and bots and there was just a lot of junk on the back end of our site, which slowed it down. It made it harder for people to find. We spent a lot of time and money and energy fixing it. I know there's tools now that can help with all the updates and things on WordPress, and I shouldn't be so afraid of WordPress anymore. But that was the time when we switched over to Squarespace for a little bit of peace of mind with the updating and stuff. I also had a very small team at the time, so everything with the site was like falling on me, and I wanted a little more. I didn't want to worry about that piece of it.
Yeah. I mean, when it's just another thing you have to take care of, like going the easy route, and which Squarespace is great. So like, it's not like, oh, we just took the easy route, and when it's still great. So
yeah,
what parts of the brand of Trade Show Bootcamp were hard to leave behind, or were there hard parts?
I think it's funny. I wasn't attached to like our old logo or our colors, or we brought some of those pieces over in a refreshed way. We use these like diagonal lines that have been brought into like branding elements, but I was mostly concerned that people wouldn't be able to find us. So I
Mm.
guess SEO was my main
Yes.
concern. When you've been in business for 8 years and you've started to build a name for yourself, you worry that people aren't going to be able to find you
Mm.
anymore,
Mhm.
and or they're going to get confused and think, okay, well, this isn't for me anymore. And so, um, I wasn't too concerned about some of the, like, branding assets that we
Right.
had. If anything, once I got over my mindset stuff of like, "Oh, nobody's gonna know who I am anymore," then it was like I was excited. I was excited for the new slate of like, "Okay, we can step into this new version of what we're doing and who we're supporting. I can rethink how we're doing this website. We can make it we can make it feel more aligned for
Mhm.
who we're trying to serve and also who I am as a person, as the owner behind the business."
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, earlier you mentioned there were some hiccups in the
Always, right?
process. With, of course, I don't know if any rebrand has ever gone perfect. So,
Oh.
do you want to share some of what those were?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned the Instagram thing, that was
Mhm.
real stressful for me because majority of our work at that point was in referral, like, majority of the new business and new clients we were serving was coming through social media. And so making that switch was a little clunky, but we ended up being fine in the end. I also hired somebody on, I think it was like Fiverr or Upwork or something, to create a video for us. It's actually still up if people want to go see it. It's on the Trade Show Camp handle at on Instagram, but it was a video of our old logo basically being dismantled and the new logo Proof to Product
Oh.
being like shown. And then it
Mhm.
tells people, come find us at prooftoproduct.com. And I remember that felt so extra at the time, like, to work this into our plan. But I remember seeing it and feeling like, oh my gosh, this shows people. It doesn't just tell them,
Mhm.
it shows them, here's who we were and here's who we are now, and come hang out with us on the in our new spaces.
Mhm.
But your question was more about hiccups. I think I struggled with the layering of all the pieces. I really I'm a very strategic person. I like to think big picture. And so to me, this was a chance to reset things. And like I was saying before, we could reset programs, we could reset our offers, we could reset the website. We're rebuilding this. But I do think that caused me to spiral out a little bit in terms of overthinking. And so I did have to like let go. I'm like, no, we can do this later. Like I had to have some real honest talks with myself of like, okay, we need the site up with our offers and basic information. The rest we can move later if we need to. Like, I remember overthinking blog posts. Are we
Mhm.
taking these with us or are we leaving them behind? Like, what are we doing here? Um, so there were some technical things like that I think I spent a little too much energy on. But in the end, it all worked out fine.
Yeah, as it does. And I think you like going back to the logo video and like all that. I think everything, yes, it was strategic, but I also really think it speaks to how much you care about your community and like you wanted to make sure that they still felt supported, that they weren't lost in the shuffle. Like it wasn't just like they'll figure it out. Like you really cared about yes, your brand continuity, but also about your community and like you don't want them to feel like you just closed up shop and moved on,
Yeah.
like that you could still be found and connect with them. So I think that's really important.
Thank you. Yeah. You know, when you're rebranding, you're looking at things from so many angles, right? Just like you're thinking about it from, how do we talk about this brand? How does the brand look? Who am I servicing and what do I need to make sure they know about what we're doing here? And your point of, I don't want to leave anyone behind. I want them to
Mhm.
know where to find us, how we're still here to support them. Things just look a little different now,
Yeah.
and that's okay too.
Yeah. Do you remember, did you have any like people confused or like,
Yeah.
oh, like what happened? Like
I
was it
mean,
just a few or did you feel like a lot of people were confused? Like
it's
was it
It's funny. I still get people. So now we're like 5 years past this rebrand, right? And I still get people referring to our program as Trade Show Boot Camp sometimes.
Really?
Yes, and they know it's proof to product. They know our program names are different, but I think I don't know. It's people that came through the program early on. So people that came through when we were Trade Show Boot Camp, I think they still in their head refer to it as boot
Mm.
camp. And I don't take any offense to that. Like that was,
Yeah.
that's who we were then, and there's no problem with that now. But I do think it's funny that I would say it was a small portion, but it does come up from time to time still.
Yeah.
And the other thing is too, before I rebranded, I think going back to my fears around not being found and nobody knowing, I had done a lot of things prior to this rebrand. So I had taught classes for Creative Live where a trade show boot camp had been plastered all over the internet. I had been interviewed on a ton of other podcasts where trade show boot camp had been backlinked and all these things, And so part of my struggle was, do I go back to these people and ask them to update things so that we continue to have the cross linking? We did, do all the forwarding and things like that. But that was an area I didn't know a lot about, and I was relying on other people to help guide me. But that felt like a struggle too, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And I get that. But I think one, it's kind of smart to sometimes go back and be like, hey, can you up? I've even had people, and I'm not like a big name, but I've had, I think maybe like 2, maybe 3 people over the last 10 years who've emailed me and been like, hey, like I changed my business name, or like I even had someone, they were like, I was on your podcast and like I like mentioned this product or freebie or something, and like I'm no longer associated with that. Can you like remove
Interesting.
the link? Or like not in a bad way. It was just like I don't sell that, or like whatever it was. So
That's smart of them to come back and update.
yeah, I was like, oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Like, part of me was honestly kind of even surprised that they like remembered, because again, I'm not like a huge that was an old podcast and wasn't a very large audience, but I was like, I mean, it's smart to like
It's smart. And we didn't do all of that. I probably should. We did for key things, but
yeah,
not all. And when I mean key, I just mean like things that we knew were driving traffic
right.
to our previous site.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is the smart strategy, especially like you have a lot of backlinks out there. And so it would be like a full-time job to go reach out to all of those and fix that. So like for anyone listening who's like, oh gosh, do I have to do that? Like Katie said, pay attention to what is driving traffic. Like in your analytics, you should be able to see like, oh, people are coming from this website, and you could reach out to them and ask. Otherwise, like you had the forward set up and people can still connect with you. So
Yeah.
let's talk about, because it's been several years since you rebranded. How has it impacted your business?
It's been awesome. I wish I would have done it sooner. I think that I was afraid and I let fear hold me back for too long. And if I had made it sooner, I think we would have helped more people at this point in my business because, it's been 5 years since the rebrand. We've continued to have massive growth. Our podcast has over 1.3 million downloads.
Amazing.
I know. It's wild. Our revenue has grown year over year. We've supported over 30,000 product brands now who want to learn how to sell wholesale. Like, my point is, the rebrand was like a rebirth of who we were and how we spoke to people. And I feel that the name does a much better job of articulating who our programs are for, how we can help people, and it's welcoming, it's inviting. And not that Trade Show Boot Camp wasn't, but it sounds like an army boot camp, like it sounds like we're going to bring you in and do a lot of work. And we do a lot of work in our program.
Right. Yeah.
Important work. But at the same time, business can be fun and we can build things our own way. And I didn't want people to think there's only one way to build a business. So in terms of, what I learned or how I wish I would have done it sooner. And it really has positively impacted my business. Yes, there's people who still refer to us with the old name, or there's still, people who get confused. But it's a small amount of people.
Yeah. And I think, honestly, I think that's going to happen with any brand. Like we've all seen companies change names. And
Totally.
I mean, I don't know. I'm assuming this happens in every city, but we have a local arena that changes names. We actually have like 3 that have changed names like 3 times in 10 years.
Yes.
And so I like when it's mentioned in conversation with people, it's like at the da 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 slash or whatever it's called.
Yep, yep. Same, same. We had it's, downtown LA, it's always been Staples Center. It's been crypto for I don't know how many years, but I still call it Staples Center. And, like, we've got a mall near us that is a Westfield Mall, but it was Fox Hills Mall for decades, and so
Mhm.
we still refer to it. So I get that part of it. I think if anything, it's kind of endearing and the OG people know, like, "Oh,"
Yeah.
like, "No."
Yeah.
But I do think from like a brand perspective and a growth of my business, doing the rebrand enabled me to better connect with and reach more people,
Mhm.
which is what we're trying to do, right?
Right.
Like we're trying to increase our visibility, we're trying to help more people, we're trying to make a bigger impact. And I didn't realize, I mean, I felt the uncomfortable friction, but like I didn't realize what a positive
Mm.
outcome would happen when we did the rebrand.
Mhm. And what about how did it impact you like personally as the owner?
Yeah. It's interesting. I felt a lot more confident when I talk about my business. I remember being at conferences where I would speak on stage and then I'd come off the stage and people would be like, "So what's your company name again?"
Mm.
And I'd say, "Oh, we're Trade Show Boot Camp, but we do a lot more than trade shows." I felt like I was like
A
caveating.
disclaimer. Yeah.
Yes, I felt like I was giving a disclaimer or a caveat, like, but we work with a lot of people, and nobody wants to feel like that. Nobody wants to feel like they're explaining themselves away. And, now I confidently say, "Hey, we're proof to product and I work with product, people making physical products," and they get it.
Mhm.
They totally get it. So I think it allowed me to step wholeheartedly into more. We've expanded our product offerings. We've expanded our coaching programs. We've done a lot. And I think because it does feel right, the name is right. It makes it easy to talk about publicly. It makes it easier to do business.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so to wrap up,
Yeah.
last question. What advice do you have for people who are like, okay, maybe I'm also scared of rebranding? Like,
Yeah.
what
That's
advice
it.
do you have for someone thinking about rebranding?
Yeah, I would say if you are thinking about rebranding, then it is likely time to do it.
Mm.
If it has been sitting in your brain for a little bit and you're feeling like, "Ugh, I don't know if our name matches what we're doing. I don't know if," or maybe you're not changing the name. Maybe you're rebranding like the colors and the logo and stuff. If you've been feeling like something's off, then it's probably time to look into that further. Now, I don't want anyone chasing shiny objects, like we don't need to be changing our brand all the time just for the sake of it. But truly, if you feel like your brand, the look, the feel, the messaging behind it is no longer serving who you're trying to work with and it's not attracting the right people, then take a look at it. Give yourself that space to do an audit, or, just take a look at it.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Love it. Okay, so where can we connect with you online for all the product people who are like, okay, well, Katie is who I need to follow?
Come hang out with us, friends. Yeah, sure. So we are at prooftoproduct.com. I mainly hang out on Instagram and I'm at proof to product there. If you want to see that video of the transition, that's at Trade Show Camp. I'll give Jess the link there in case she wants to include that in the show notes. But if you do have product-based business owners listening, I encourage you to check out our podcast. That's a really great place to start. We've got like 365 episodes, I think, at this point. And just real tactical stuff, not strategic, encouraging, but also concrete stuff you can do to move your business forward.
Love it. I will link to all of that in the show notes for you guys. But thank you so much for being here, Katie.
Jess, thank you so much for having me. It's always fun to chat with you. You're like so incredible, and I'm glad you're doing this series.
Well, thank you. If today's branding story inspired you and you're ready to start your own rebrand adventure, head over to justcreatives.com/rebrand to explore how we can work together on your brand. If you enjoyed today's show, be sure to leave a review or share it on Instagram, and tune in next week for another episode.